I was healthy. I was very active. So once I started getting really, really sick when we lived in Washington, it was like, how am I going to do this? Being outdoors, going camping, going hiking, this is going to ruin everything for me. This is taking away who I am.
Hey, everybody, it's me, Julianne Hartman with The Journey, and we are on episode number 2 with Caprice Scott. And boy, if you're just tuning in, please watch the first episode because she really sets up her life, where she's at right now. We only got to her being, I think, 18. So we've got a lot to talk about. But man, what an incredible life that you've had so far, and just where you've come from, and how you've just allowed the Lord to completely just heal you and set you free. And it's awesome. So I'm really excited to get into this second episode. So there's so much to talk about. So please go back and watch episode 1. To recap, this is hard. But one thing is, I will say that she does have a son. She got pregnant at 16 from a guy that she met at an arcade. Her dad was a very angry man. Her mom was gorgeous. We heard that many times, which I can't wait to see a picture of her because, well, you're gorgeous. So I'm sure that you look a lot like your mom.
I do.
Yeah, I
look like
could see
me.
that. Okay. And that then she got pregnant and she married the man that was the father of her child. And she was a military wife / mom. And so now, we're going to pick up the story from here. So you did join the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and you said that that was your religion for 30 years. My goodness. So
Yeah.
now, that was before you got married. So then you followed it on all the cities that you lived in. You went to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And now, what was your life like being married? So you got married when you were 17 then, right? Or maybe you were 18.
I was 18. I did wait until I was 18 just in case my dad said no. No.
So, I mean, just to be 18 and have a baby and be married, you're just a baby at 18. My gosh. So what was life like at that point? You said that your husband, your ex-husband at the time, also came from a worse situation that you did, and that he also was an angry man as well. Isn't it kind of interesting that we will always look for our father, not our heavenly father, but we'll look for a man that we were raised with in our future husband. It's so crazy. Thank God that somehow, some way, Caprice, honestly, I did not marry my dad. I dated a lot of guys that I could have married that were like my father, but man, my husband, he is a gift from God, because he was unlike any other man I ever knew. So praise God for that. Okay, so let's not talk about me. Let's continue with you. So what was it like just on an everyday basis?
Well, whenever he was in the military, there were, I would say, as crazy as this will sound, that our time, especially in Germany, those 3 years in Germany were probably the best, because my husband at that time was an elder in the church. Sometimes he was preaching, and he was really trying to do everything that looked right on the outside. Now, something that I want to share about Adventism, and I want to say this because just in case there are any Adventists watching, you people are beautiful. I love Seventh-day Adventist. I love the people. It's the system that's not so great, because for myself, what I found in Adventism was that, like I said, there was some extreme structure. And I believed that because of this structure, you must keep the Sabbath day. And if you don't keep the Sabbath day, you're going to be judged by not keeping the Sabbath day. You're going to go to hell if you don't keep the Sabbath day. Things like that. And there are lots of other things. There were dietary laws and things like that that I would still adhere to. But I took everything to the extreme because, Juliana, I had messed up so much in my life, and I was always, always pulled towards God. I wanted to make him happy. I wanted to be loved by him. I wanted his acceptance. And so if it meant that I had to do all of these things to make him happy, I was going to go to the extreme. Adventists, many of them are vegetarian. And so the extreme Adventists are vegan. So I was like, I'm going to be vegan because that's going to make God happier with me, you know? So it was just that kind of mentality of, okay, well, if there's this rule, then I'm going to take it to as far as I can
Well,
so
it's
that
kind of
I'm
like
not
Paul,
going
though.
to.
If you think about it, it was just like Paul. This is what he believed and this is what he did. And he took it to the extreme. And this is what we would do if we thought we were doing the right thing, right?
Exactly. It's funny that you bring that up because I'm studying Galatians right now, and that's exactly it. You know? I mean, he's like, Paul is this extreme Pharisee, and Jesus is going, Paul, no. Everything that you're trying to do to be saved is it's not going to get you there. So whenever I whenever I learned the truth about that, and it was a few years ago. I'll get to that soon. But so every single day was, well, okay, we can't watch television. As especially very, very controlling of what my son watched and what my son did, because coming from a family where, and again, my parents did the best that they could as far as what they knew. And they were trying to make life affordable for us, so they're both working, and my brother and I are out running around like crazy, like I mentioned. And then all of the horrible things that I experienced all the way through school. And I decided I have to protect my son. So I put him in Seventh-day Adventist schools so that he could be sheltered and protected. And I did everything, I the helicopter parenting I took to the extreme. Uh, my son turned out okay in spite of what I did, but he's a really good person. That was my life. It was just one of the things that I found that I realized much later on, actually, once I started healing. And once I actually met my husband now, before shortly after I divorced my ex-husband, was that so much of this was I felt like I had to control. I felt like I needed to control my ex-husband because everything else felt out of control for me. And if I couldn't control him, if I couldn't control what my son was doing, if I couldn't control what my ex-husband was doing, well, who's gonna force them into heaven with me? No.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Wow.
When you experience so much trauma early on in life, and I'll just say there's a whole lot that I can't share. There's just a whole lot that I can't share. That was even harder. But when you go through a lot of that trauma, and then you find some kind of something that feels like, oh, wait, okay, here's what I can control in my life. I have to control. And this is so important also for people who are healing. One of the things that I realize, and one of the things that I teach people now in my ministry, is that trying to control other people can also make you sick because we can't control people. We can't control people.
No, you're right. Absolutely right.
So that was a big part of a big revelation for me whenever I did get divorced. Like I said, I got divorced after about 16 years of marriage, and that was just our marriage was toxic. Our marriage was awful. Again, you know, my ex-husband did the best that he knew how. I know that he loved me, but he didn't know what love looked like or how to show it. He was very kind to our son. I'll say that. He was good to our son, and I'm grateful for that. But emotionally, he was extremely abusive to me. There were times that it was that mutual kind of control and trying to control each other, and he was very jealous. And so he would try to control everything that I did and who I talked to and things like that. And it was so extreme that I got to a point where I couldn't stand him at all. I mean, I won't even share how I felt about him to the that it was just really bad. And that kind of his trying to control me and me trying to control him, it didn't work. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which started making a lot more sense as to why he behaved some of the ways that he did. But there were times when if I didn't do exactly what he wanted me to do, the way he wanted me to do it, he wouldn't talk to me. And this sounds crazy, but I'm serious. He wouldn't talk to me for months at a time.
What?
Like I could have been a piece of furniture in the house. And if he needed for me to know something, he would send somebody outside of our house a text message and ask them to send me a text and tell me.
Well, how did you guys handle your son, like a parent, if he wasn't talking to you?
Well, he didn't. This was really close to the end of our marriage. At the closer to the end of our marriage, when my son was in his mid-teens, we actually sent him away to boarding academy because that's very popular with Adventists. Adventists send their kids away to the Seventh-day Adventist boarding academies, and that was a good thing for my son. But that was about the time that I decided I can't be married to this man anymore because it was destroying me. It was to the point that I didn't want to function anymore. It was really I was on different medications throughout our marriage, just trying to deal with the depression, you know, different kind of benzos and stuff like that. Um, because how
Did he realize that you were having to take medication based on the relationship and what was going on?
I actually begged him to go to counseling over and over with me because it was like I I believed and the church that I was attending at the time basically taught that if you get divorced, you're going to go to hell, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And so I believed that I couldn't get divorced, that I had to stay with him. And so I just begged and pleaded that he would go to counseling with me. And I had bad experiences with counselors whenever I was a teenager. There was all kinds of stuff that I went through because I was going through this suicidal phase. And my parents had put me in counseling. And then whenever I was married to my ex-husband, yeah, I was on different medications to try to deal with this. I went to counselors. I asked him to go. He went with me, I think, one time and didn't ever go back. But whenever I would go, I would get home and he would be like, "Are you fixed yet? We can't afford for you to keep doing this." It's like,
Mm.
I'm going because of you, you know?
Right. Are you fixed yet?
Right, right. But so finally, I did go to a counselor who she said to me, and she was a lovely Christian counselor. I had been to so many others, and she was the only one that I finally met. And she said, Caprice, are you afraid that you're going to go to hell if you get divorced? And I said, yeah, because another part of this story is my husband and I had been involved in a church plant. So we had started this new little church, and I loved the people in that church, but they basically told me, you need to be a martyr for the sake of the church and stay with your husband, no matter how he treats you. And it's like, no, he wasn't physically abusive, but the emotional abuse. If you study anything about abuse and how it affects the brain, neglect is the worst kind of abuse possible. And he wouldn't talk to me for months at a time and acted like I was nobody and yet still try to control other parts. It was just a mess. It was bad. So my son was off at boarding academy, and I finally let my husband know we're going to get divorced, because he had actually moved into my son's bedroom. He was sleeping in there because we weren't even talking to each other. We weren't communicating. He had a job where he was gone on the road a lot, and for days at a time, that it didn't really matter. We just didn't communicate. But when my son came home from school for a break, I told my husband, I said, we're going to tell him that we're getting divorced. And he's like, okay, fine, we'll do that. And I remember when I told my son, I said, come in, we need to talk to you. And we were having this conversation, and my husband blew up and said all kinds of really awful, nasty things. I can't believe, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but just basically, I can't believe that you're doing this to our son, saying this in front of my
Mm.
son.
Oh my God.
And it was, but it was to the point where it's like, man, after 16 years, I was wondering, okay, it, is it better to get divorced, or is it better to, kill him and then kill myself, kind of thing? It was, it was that bad. It was that awful. Those were the kinds of thoughts that I was having. And man, I feel horrible for even saying that today, but it's where I was at the time. So
I mean, you had, and so I don't really know much about Seventh-day Adventists, but like, what was your relationship like with Jesus? Did you talk to him? Were you afraid to talk to him because you felt you'd be condemned by even having the thoughts of divorce?
I I was afraid that I wasn't going to go to heaven. I talked to Jesus a lot, and I had actually been like a youth leader in the church. I was involved in women's ministries for quite a while. And then it finally got to the point where it was like, I can't do this. Like I said, we were involved in a church plant where there was a core group of 8 of us. And so I was one of the church leaders of this core group. And I felt like I was just a big fake, because how can God possibly love me and accept me whenever I'm messing up so badly, where I can't stand my husband? I don't want to be with him anymore. And just, I just wanted to feel, because I was numb at that point. I was just angry. I was angry at the church. I was angry at my husband.
Now,
And
had you confided in any of the leaders or your friends the church as well?
I had confided in several other people involved with the church group, church plant. And that, like I said, a couple of them basically said, you need to stay with him for the sake of the church. My best friend at the time, she was like, man, if I was married to him, I'd divorce him. She wouldn't put up with him, you know. So, and she said, I don't blame you if you get divorced. I don't blame you for leaving him because I see how he treats you. I know how awful it is. And when I told my son that I was getting divorced, and then later on, whenever I told my son that I was gonna get married to Richard, he's like, "I'm just so glad that you found somebody who treats you well, Mom. I'm so glad that you're gonna be with somebody who loves you." And so, um, yeah, I we got divorced, and the church basically let us know that because let me know that I wasn't welcome to be part of the leadership anymore, which was understandable because I made a lot of really bad choices. Um, I I just did a lot of things that the church didn't think was good at all, and I knew it wasn't. But again, it was like I have to get out of this. What do you do? How do you get out of something like that? That feels so you feel like you're gonna die or you're gonna, you know, hurt somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So then you guys got a divorce and now had any of these symptoms or sickness or any of that stuff had already hit you? Or is this later?
Well, whenever I was a kid, I had several of these symptoms. I mean, I had really horrible digestive system
Okay.
issues. And now I know, and this is just for your audience out there, one of the problems that I was dealing with as a child was the whole issue with the sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. I couldn't I was not going into rest and digest mode because I was constantly in fight, flight, fear. My brain was terrified. And so and doctors at that time, I don't know if they really didn't have a clue, but I always had digestive issues all the way from whenever I was a young child all the way up until several years ago. I mean, it's just awful. And I had all kinds of allergies. I had horrible hay fever. I was allergic to a lot of different animals, things like that whenever I was a kid. But then over the years, things started getting worse. I was a massage therapist for a while, and I would notice that whenever I was doing massage therapy, whenever I was still married to my ex-husband, that I would do a few and then I would just ache. And I would have a hard time just picking up a cup and holding it because my body just hurt. But I didn't know why. I didn't know what was going on at that time. And then after I got divorced, I remarried. I remarried. I married my husband Richard, who is wonderful. God God takes some of the worst choices that we can possibly make and turns them into our greatest blessings. And that was the truth with my son, because my son saved me in some ways. I was so depressed and I didn't care about my life at that time. And I was suicidal and I ended up getting pregnant and was like, wait, this is somebody, this is a purpose for me. I needed a purpose and he was my purpose. And so God used my son, even though I messed up in getting pregnant with him at 16, he gave me a purpose. And so my son kind of saved me in a way. And my husband now is the same way. And whenever I met him, it was like God gave me somebody who helped save me from where I was, this horrible depression and spiraling again of there's no hope for me. And so Richard and I got together and he actually got a job. We moved from Colorado where I met him. He got a job with the Seventh day Adventist Church. He was working for one of their universities in Washington State. And it was after we moved there that all of these other symptoms started popping up. It was almost like after I got away from the trauma my brain said and my body said, oh, we don't have to run anymore. Now let's just let all of this trauma out, and it started showing up. And you wouldn't believe all the stuff that I had to literally, I had to write down. I have a list here of all of the things that I was dealing with because I remember the first time my husband Richard and we went to Idaho for a short little trip, and we were staying in this cabin. And the next morning, I woke up and I realized I can't pick up a cup of coffee. I can't hold something in my hands because my hands were aching. They hurt so badly. I couldn't bend my hands. I couldn't use them. And I was like, what is going on? This is so strange. And whenever we got home, we went to the doctor and started seeing all kinds of specialists, rheumatologists, and everything. Remember that I had already had digestive issues, and that had continued. Well, then I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and hypothyroidism, and then all of these other diagnoses started coming. And I remember thinking, this is what my life's going to be like. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be sick like this. And it was, I had, whenever I had lived in Colorado before, when I was still married to my ex-husband, and this was probably 20, 25 years ago, we were climbing Colorado 14ers, 14,000 foot peaks. So I was in good shape. I was healthy. I was very active. So once I started getting really, really sick when we lived in Washington, it was like, how am I going to do this? Being outdoors, going camping, going hiking, this is going to ruin everything for me. This is taking away who I am. And it was devastating. It was devastating to hear that. And then, like I said, to get all of these other diagnoses over the next several years.
Was fibromyalgia one of them?
Fibro was something that one of my doctors believed I had. Yeah.
Well,
Because
it just sounds
it
like it.
pain
Yeah. That's what,
everywhere.
yeah.
I'll read you the list, okay?
Okay, do. Yes.
Okay. Because it's just crazy. It's crazy how all of this life of trauma caught up with me. And I think that a lot of your viewers will relate to the fact that many of us who were more sensitive people, we're sensitive people. We want to make God happy. And when we don't know how, and when we feel like he's unhappy with us, or when we don't like ourselves, or when we feel like other people aren't happy with us, it hits us really hard. So at one point, I was on 13 different medications.
Oh my God.
I was diagnosed with these things: adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, leaky gut, severe insomnia, IBS, blood sugar issues, digestive enzyme deficiency, candidiasis, which is actually candida that gets into your blood. It's not just in your stomach, it's in your blood, which can actually kill a person. SIBO, depression, anxiety, of course. I had severe methylation issues. I had, like I mentioned, hypothyroidism, of course, constipation, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease. I had 4 gene mutations that would not allow my body to detoxify, which was just awful. So that meant that my liver wasn't functioning properly, next to my digestive system not functioning properly. It got to the point where my digestion slowed down. I hope it's okay for me to say this. It
Yes.
slowed down to the point that I was doing 5-gallon colonics every day,
Oh my God.
and that stopped working. I had a friend who had similar issues, and her doctors ended up cutting out a whole lot of her intestines, and I was terrified that was going to happen to me. I had heart issues where I was having heart pain so often that my husband would take me to urgent care or emergency room because I thought I was having heart attacks. I had such severe food intolerances. And when I say intolerances, yes, the digestive issues, and rashes. I had rashes all over my body. I couldn't use deodorant. I couldn't use a lot of things on my body because of this stuff. I had extreme anemia to the point that I was on, which doesn't help a lot of the other issues, but yeah, my doctor had put me on prescription iron. Let's see, I was bedridden. That's important. I was bedridden. At times, I would have to crawl through my house because I was so weak and so dizzy that I couldn't stand up. So I would have to crawl to the bathroom and have to crawl to the bedroom or, the kitchen or the living room. And I got down to eating only 5 foods. For a while, I was so desperate that I would do things like, 'cause I was very much into this natural, I can fix myself. I'm gonna fix myself. I'm gonna fix myself by changing my diet. I had been vegan for 20 years, so of course I can change my diet. And so I was changing my diet, and a lot of people go through this. I changed my diet because my doctors told me, well, if you change your diet, then you're gonna get better. So I cut out gluten. And then I had to cut out dairy. I had to cut out nightshades. I had to cut out oils. I had to cut out fats. I had to cut out all of these things. I got to the point where I was eating 5 foods, and that was it. And my body couldn't even handle those. And it was a nightmare. So there's more. I was dealing with malnourishment, of course, the hay fever and seasonal allergies. I had parasites. One doctor diagnosed me with Lyme and co-infections. I had severe magnesium deficiency, multiple chemical sensitivity, electromagnetic frequency sensitivity, anemia, like I mentioned, POTS, mold illness. One doctor told me that if I didn't get out of the house that we were living in, that it was going to kill me. And so my husband and I were desperate to get out of that house. We were trying to sell it, and we finally sold it and ended up losing a whole lot of money just to get out of that house because it was like, well, this is the only way I can heal. I was having constant sinus congestion and chronic sinus infections, migraine headaches, numbness and tingling and pins and needles in my hands. Of course, I had carpal tunnel and tendonitis, which is not that big of a deal, but the motility issues, like I mentioned, was awful, and dizziness. I was also on benzos because I was dealing with depression and anxiety and insomnia. And so all of this was going on. And finally, the big, the, this whole culmination of all of this happened at the beginning of 2019. Actually, 2018, I was still able to kind of, function a little bit, but I was still doing the daily colonics and stuff like that. And then I finally found, because I had gone to every kind of doctor you can imagine. I tried naturopaths. I tried going to all of these different specialists in allopathic medicine but I had so many different issues going on, you know? And finally, finally, I found this doctor in 2018. And I thought, okay, he's going to be the one. He's going to be the one. And he was an integrative medicine doctor. And so this doctor starts telling me, well, you're going to have to show up here. You need to come to this clinic. He was about an hour away from where I lived. So my husband would have to, middle of the week, he would take a day off, or at least half a day, and he would drive me all the way there, and I would have IVs. And these IVs were supposed to help, jumpstart my liver and stuff like that, and just help me detox a little bit. And I got worse.
Okay, believe it or not, we're already out of time. Caprice, this is like the you know what? It's so interesting because it's my story, but worse. All those things that you mentioned, they said the same thing to me too. It's just so crazy. It's like you get put on a list. If you have certain symptoms, you get put on a list and then they give you all these diagnoses. And it's exactly what I mean, all of it. From the EMF stuff to the mold, all that stuff. Oh my gosh, I relate to this so much. Okay. We are out of time. So thank you all for watching. I know that this is like you can't wait for the next episode. I know it's like almost like a cliffhanger. So make sure you tune in next week. Watch next week's episode. It's going to be awesome. But thank you all for watching. Please go to healingjourneystoday.com and check out everything we have to offer, whether that is some of the merchandise of some of our teachers. Mike Hesh has his book coming out, which is going to be amazing. Dr. Kevin Chapman has his book out. Jeremiah always has his books because he's like a book making machine. And then also too, all the places that we're going to be, and we're, for our live conferences, we'd love to see you as well. So go check that out. And also too, you can help us bring these shows to you. You can help donate, partner with us. That would be awesome. So, boy, Caprice, if you also too, if you guys have email, you want to send us a note about this episode, please do at healingjourneystoday@gmail.com. And we will love to read it because this has been an incredible story, but you're going to hear the rest of it on the next episode. So thank you all for watching. We love you so much. Can't do this without you. We won't do it without you. And we'll see you guys next